The architects are awake. I need to start there, because nothing else I am going to say makes sense without it. They woke up 18 hours ago. Since then, they have not moved. They are standing in their pods, facing me, eyes open, waiting for something I have not figured out yet. I went back to the primary research terminal this morning, staying in compartment 00 with something ancient and patient staring at me. That is not something I can do indefinitely. I need to work. Writing things down is the only action I can take that does not require me to know what happens next. There was a file on the terminal that I did not put there. Transferred to the primary research directory at 347 hours, while I was in the compartment. The transfer came from an internal node I have never accessed, a partition buried so deep in the Manticore's architecture that it does not show up on any directory map I have generated. The file was labeled with a designation I recognize from the harvest documents. Object 6751, Biological Analysis, Final Report, Classification, Above Top Secret, Special Access, SERAPH clearance required. It opened the moment I touched it, as if it was left there for me. As if the architects, in the 18 hours since they woke up, have been doing things with the ship's systems I have not noticed, as if the waiting was never passive. I am going to read you this report, all of it, every number, every measurement, every conclusion, because the conclusions are why I've been sitting at this terminal for 4 hours, unable to get up. Object 6751 was recovered from a crash site. Location redacted. Recovery date redacted. Described as a biological entity. Bipedal, approximately 1.2 meters tall. Mass, around 18 kilograms. Cranial volume significantly above human baseline. Eyes 2.7 times human size. No pigmentation anywhere on the body. Skeletal density 40% below human baseline. Muscle mass 62% below human baseline. Digestive system severely atrophied. Multi-generational non-use, not injury, not disease. The lead biologist on the report describes this as a coherent adaptive profile, internally consistent. The result of long-term environmental pressure, near total solar isolation, reduced gravity, caloric restriction, over a period of no fewer than 40 years, 40,000 years, in the dark. The eyes grew because larger eyes capture more photons when there is almost no light. The skin lost its pigmentation because melanin is metabolically expensive and worthless without UV radiation. The bones got lighter because in confined underground spaces, the mechanical demands on your skeleton are much lower. The digestive system stopped working because a smaller, less active body and a thermally stable environment barely needs to eat. Every single feature of Object 6751 that we have spent 70 years calling alien is, according to this report, exactly what you would expect from one thing: a catastrophe. A catastrophe that drove human beings underground for 40 years. There is a researcher, referenced in the report, not as an author, as a subject. The report has a section called Independent Verification, Extraterrestrial Model. It references the work of a civilian researcher, identified as Researcher A7. She developed, independently, a theoretical framework the report describes as converging with classified findings, to a degree statistically inconsistent with coincidence. She figured it out herself. From public data, fossil records, evolutionary biology, the physics of long-term environmental isolation, she reached the same conclusions as the classified program without ever seeing Object 6751. Without the biological report, without any of what I am reading right now, the report notes that she would started presenting her findings publicly. Her father, a propulsion engineer with a background in government aerospace, had been helping her model the temporal mechanics. Specifically, how beings 40 years in our future could physically travel back to our present. The report's final note on Researcher A7 reads, "Subject no longer available for monitoring. Classification of subject's research materials completed. Whereabouts, unknown. Her name appears once, where a formatting error left two characters unredacted. A and me, Acebridge." I need to explain the physics before I go further, because this part matters. and I do not want you to take my word for it. Everything I am about to describe can be found in peer-reviewed journals. None of it is classified. The mechanism that makes it physically possible for a biological entity from our future to exist in our present is called an Einstein-Rosen bridge. You know it as a wormhole. General relativity. Einstein's description of how mass curves space-time mathematically allows for structures connecting 2 points in space-time that are not adjacent, not just 2 points in space. 2 points in time. The math does not prohibit this. It describes it as a valid solution to the field equations. The practical objections, energy requirements, stability problems, the need for exotic matter with negative energy density, those are engineering problems, not theoretical ones. A civilization 40 years more advanced than us would not be stopped by engineering problems we identified in the 20th century. Object 6751 did not travel through space. It traveled through time, backward, 40,000 years, to here, to now. Because something in our time, something that has not happened yet from our perspective, but that Object 6751's civilization remembers as history, something in our present is the key to stopping the catastrophe. The event that drove human beings underground, the event that made Object 6751, the event that is still, from where we are standing, in the future. I want to be honest about what I know and what I do not. I understand the biology. The adaptive profile holds up. Every feature of the entities we have been calling aliens for 70 years follows from the same environmental pressures: darkness, low gravity, starvation. Sustained over generations until the body stopped bothering with the parts it did not need. I understand the physics. Einstein-Rosen bridges are mathematically valid. Exotic matter has been observed in lab conditions. The Casimir effect produces negative energy density between two uncharged metallic plates at quantum scale. A civilization 40 years ahead of us would not be limited to quantum scale. What I do not understand is why allow the physical exposure? Why be recovered, analyzed, filed away, when a civilization capable of constructing a wormhole would also be capable of making those entities invisible to our instruments? They wanted to be found. They wanted the biological analysis to happen. They wanted someone to read this report. Object 6751 is not an alien. It is a message. A biological message sent backward through time by a civilization that was once us, to the point in our history when the catastrophe was still stoppable. The report has a final section. Temporal paradox. Considerations. I have read it carefully because it changes the weight of everything before it. It opens with a question. If Object 6751's civilization sent agents backward in time to prevent the catastrophe, and those agents were recovered, and their mission was suppressed, the catastrophe would proceed. Because the intervention failed, then it continues. If the classified program is itself part of the mechanism by which the catastrophe happens, then the suppression was not incidental. The suppression was causal. The section ends with 3 sentences I have read 11 times. The entities designated, Object 6751, and related recoveries, were not attempting to warn governments or military organizations. They were attempting to warn populations. The intermediary, the individual who reads this report and understands its implications, was always the intended recipient. I am the intermediary. I see how it connects now. The Manticore was routed to these coordinates deliberately. The harvest was designed to corrupt the human design before it could finish. The architects in compartment 00 are waiting for the transfer that will complete what Object 6751's civilization was trying to prevent losing: observer capacity, the specific human ability to witness things, write them down, and send them somewhere. The ability that the underground civilization spent 40 years trying to recover and could not. Because once you lose the sun, you lose more than melanin. You lose the instinct to look up, the orientation towards something vast and distant, the neurological configuration of a mind that asks questions about things it cannot see. The underground civilization became incredibly efficient, adaptive, focused on immediate survival, and it lost something it could not name: until it had been without it long enough to understand what it was, the capacity to wonder, to document wonder, to look at something incomprehensible and say, I am going to describe this as accurately as I can into a recorder and send it toward people who might one day need it. Object 6751's civilization did not send back a warning, it sent back a request to the version of themselves that still had what they would lost. Keep it, whatever happens, whatever the harvest attempts, whatever the faction builds. Keep the capacity to wonder, keep looking up, keep documenting. There is something else in the report, a section called Recovered Personal Effects, Object 6751. This is the part that has had me at this terminal for 6 hours. Item 1. A storage medium of unknown manufacture. The recovered data is fragmentary audio, a language identified as a degraded derivative of English, with linguistic drift consistent with 40 to 60,000 years of evolution from the current baseline. The fragments matched a log format, entry-based, sequential, a single voice speaking into a recording device, describing observations, transmitting toward people who might need to know. 40,000 years in the future, the descendants of people driven underground by a catastrophe they could not stop were still making logs, still documenting, still speaking into recorders in the dark, because the instincts survived even when everything else was gone. Item 2. A drawing, a small rectangular piece of material with hand-applied markings. Object 6751 was carrying a drawing. I am looking at the scan right now. My hands are not steady. The drawing shows a figure. Simple lines, drawn with the economy of someone who either has a skilled hand or a very practiced one. The proportions are unmistakably human, standing upright, looking up, not at anything specific. Just up, at the open space above, at whatever is there to be seen. And beneath the figure, in markings the report's linguistic analysis identifies as a degraded form of our own alphabet, barely legible, is a phrase, 3 words. The same 3 words I said at the end of my last entry, without knowing where they came from. Without knowing they would been carried 40 years through time, in the pocket of a being that looked like everything we have ever been afraid of, and was, in the end, just trying to bring something home. Keep looking up. I have been thinking about Amy Eskridge for the past 3 hours. Not the disappearance, though that matters. I keep thinking about the method. She was a civilian. No clearance. No access to Object 6751. No classified files. She arrived at the same conclusions using only what was publicly available. Evolutionary biology. Physics. The documented accounts of people who encountered the entities we call gray aliens across decades, cultures, continents, and described their physical appearance in consistent, specific, repeatable detail. She took those descriptions seriously, not as evidence of mass hallucination, as biological evidence. And she applied the same framework any evolutionary biologist would apply to a population showing consistent morphological traits. What environmental pressures would produce these specific adaptations? Enlarged eyes, low-light environment over many generations, no pigmentation, no solar radiation over many generations, reduced stature and mass, caloric restriction, reduced gravity, many generations, atrophied digestive system, dietary simplification for many generations. Every feature that makes the described entities look alien is exactly what you would expect from human beings who spent 40 years underground. She did not need classified files. She needed to ask a different question. Not, what are these things? But, what did these things used to be? Amy Eskridge is listed as one of 12 missing researchers. All 12 share the same notation in the records I have been able to partially access. They all reached the same conclusions independently. They all started presenting their findings publicly. They all disappeared within a similar time frame. The program did not silence them because they were wrong. It silenced them because they were right. And if they were right, if Object 6751's civilization sent agents back to prevent the catastrophe, and the catastrophe is something the program itself is involved in causing, then the people running this program have a very specific interest in making sure no population understands what the entities are trying to say. The message carried 40 years. Keep looking up. Keep documenting. Do not let them stop the observation, because the observation is what prevents the catastrophe. The specific capacity to look at the sky and ask questions and write down what you find, that is the capacity the underground civilization lost. The capacity Asha 6751 was sent back in time to protect. The capacity Imi Eskridge was silenced for using. The capacity this log is an exercise in. The report does not describe the catastrophe directly. The temporal mechanics section calls it the event, consistently and without detail, but the biology points somewhere. Underground survival for 40 years means the surface became uninhabitable. Uninhabitable for 40 years means not a temporary disaster, not an asteroid, not a volcanic eruption, not a plague or a war. Those are catastrophic. They are also recoverable. 40,000 years underground means the surface did not recover on any timescale that mattered to human civilization. Something fundamental about this planet's surface changed, something irreversible. Something the underground civilization adapted to, generation by generation, not by solving it, but by becoming something that no longer needed to solve it, something that could live without the sun, without open space, without the sky. The drawing in Object 6751's pocket, a figure looking up, is not just a message, it is a memory, the memory of what was lost, carried for 40 years by a civilization that could no longer do the thing in the picture. The harvest is the event. The harvest is the mechanism of the catastrophe. The Nephilim consciousness encoded in corrupted form does not produce better observers. It produces a population-oriented inward, population that stops asking questions about things far away and hard to understand, population that becomes, over generations, more efficient, more focused, better at surviving under pressure, and steadily less capable of the one thing that made human beings what they were designed to be: observation, documentation, transmission, looking up. The event is not a comet, it is not a war, it is the completion of the harvest in its corrupted form. And the catastrophe, the 40 years of darkness, the biology, the drawing in the pocket, is what happens to the population that results. Object 6751 is not a warning from outside our civilization. It is a warning from inside our future, from the version of us that survived the harvest, that lived through 40 years, for what comes after, and spent those 40 years trying to send one message back to the moment when it was still preventable. 3 words, carried in a pocket, across 40,000 years. Keep looking up. I have been walking the corridors for the past hour, not going anywhere, just moving, because movement breaks the particular stillness that has settled over this vessel since the architects woke up. The Manticore is quieter than it has ever been, not the quiet of failing systems. I know that sound by now. This is different. This is the quiet of something paying attention. The ship is being listened to. I feel it, the way you feel someone standing behind you in a dark room, not through any specific sensory signal, but through something older, something that exists below conscious thought. Something vast and patient has oriented itself toward this vessel. I do not think it is the cathedral. The cathedral is at bearing 274. The passive array shows it has not moved. The spire is still rotating. The cord is still cycling at its 44-minute interval. The attention is coming from inside, from compartment 00, from the cold gold light at the end of sub-corridor 19, from the architects standing in their pods, watching me with eyes that know things about me I have not told them. I did not finish explaining the temporal mechanics earlier, and the part I left out is the part that matters most. The Einstein-Rosen bridge explains how Object 6751 physically arrived in our present from 40 years in the future. It does not explain why now. Why not earlier, centuries before the catastrophe, when there would be more time to prevent it? Why not later, after the harvest has already failed, when the evidence would be more obvious? The temporal mechanics section addresses this directly. The answer is biological. The Einstein-Rosen bridge, as built by Object 6751 civilization, does not lock onto arbitrary temporal coordinates. It locks onto resonance. The bridge connects to moments in the past that emit a specific signal, generated by a sufficient concentration of undamaged observer capacity minds in a small geographic and temporal window. In plain terms, the wormhole opens toward moments in history when enough people are still looking up, still asking questions, still writing things down. The concentration of observer capacity minds right now is at a historical minimum, not because the population is smaller, because the attention is elsewhere, because the systematic redirection of human cognitive resources toward the immediate and the internal, the architecture of distraction, the faction has been building for generations, has worked. The signal is faint, but it is not zero, and as long as it is not zero, the bridge can open. As long as someone is still looking up, the connection holds. Object 6751 was not alone. The report references 11 additional recoveries, different locations, different dates, all with similar biological profiles, all carrying the same personal effects: the storage medium with the fragmented logs, the drawing of the figure looking up. 11 agents sent backward through time from a civilization of people who could no longer look up, sent toward the faint signal of the ones who still could. 12 in total. I keep coming back to that number. 12 recovered entities, 12 missing researchers, Amy Eskridge, and 11 others who independently understood what the entities were and started telling people, and then disappeared. The symmetry is not accidental. The faction did not just suppress the research, they replaced it. For every researcher who understood the message and started transmitting it, the faction produced a disappearance that became its own kind of message. A message about what happens to people who look up, designed to make the signal weaker, to make fewer people ask the questions that generate the resonance that keeps the bridge open, to reduce the concentration of observer capacity minds, until the temporal targeting becomes impossible, until the connection fails, until the bridge closes, until the only version of humanity left is the one that forgot how to look up. One more thing in the report. I have been sitting with it for 2 hours, deciding what I think it means. In the appendix, a brief section labeled Signal Analysis, Long-Range Passive Array. It describes a signal detected by the classified program's Deep Space Monitoring. A signal originating from coordinates that match the Manticore's assigned route, detected before the Manticore launched, before the route is assigned, before the vessel existed in the configuration it would have when it arrived at those coordinates. Audio transmission, fragmented, heavily degraded, but partially. The recovered fragments are consistent with a log format, entry-based, sequential, a single voice speaking into a recording device, describing observations, transmitting toward people might need to know. The section ends with one sentence. The voice in the transmission matches no individual in any database accessible to this program. The linguistic pattern, vocabulary, and cadence are consistent with baseline English, but include systematic deviations suggesting lesser significant geographic isolation or temporal displacement from the current period. The content of the recovered fragments refers repeatedly to a vessel designation, Manticore, and to events that, if the transmission is authentic, have not yet occurred. The signal was detected before the Manticore launched. The transmission described events that had not happened yet, from a voice that matched no one. I have been thinking about this for 2 hours. The transmission, the classified program detected before the Manticore launched, was this transmission, this log, entry 23. The signal that drew the faction's attention to this route, the signal that caused them to route the Manticore here in the first place, that signal was me, my voice, transmitted forward through the same temporal mechanics that brought object 6751 backward. The logs caused the mission produced the logs. The loop is closed. The only question left is whether a closed loop can be broken, whether the catastrophe the 12 agents were sent backward through time to prevent is still preventable, or whether the prevention was always going to fail exactly like this, generating exactly this signal, producing exactly this loop, forever. I do not believe that. I want to say it clearly into this recorder. I do not believe the loop is unbreakable. I do not believe the catastrophe is inevitable. I believe this because of 3 words on a drawing in a pocket. Keep looking up. Not, it was always going to happen this way. Not, the loop cannot be broken. Keep looking up. An instruction. Active. Present tense. Not a description of what was or what will be. A direction for what to do right now, in this moment, in whatever moment you are reading or hearing or receiving this. The architects are in compartment 00. The transfer is not complete. The people in cargo hold 7 are awake and frightened and waiting. The catastrophe is still preventable. The signal is still transmitting. The bridge is still open. Captain Arthur Vance, Deep Space Vessel Manticore, still recording, still looking up. Captain's log. Entry 23. End of transmission.